It took long enough, but the New Orleans Saints finally named their QB1. We're getting that much closer to week one of the college football season. We'll give you some quick thoughts on who's on the hot seat and who's on the not seat. All that and more coming up on the Louisiana Lunch Hour podcast. And welcome back to the Louisiana Lunch Hour podcast. Great to be back with you on a Wednesday. The original plan of this was to admittedly be a daily podcast right around lunchtime, but I've kind of rethought it. And I think for the time being, this is going to be a 3-time-a-week podcast. Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Because I feel like it's just easier to do it that way. I'll just be honest with you. Life got in the way on a Monday, but we're definitely going to kind of keep it consistent throughout the rest of football season. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, you'll get your podcast fix in with the Louisiana Lunch Hour podcast. Appreciate you listening in, however you're doing so, especially if you're doing so on Spotify. You can go ahead and subscribe today. We're also on YouTube. We've got content coming out there on the daily, be it sound bites and clips from your favorite coaches, and a whole lot more is coming up. Let's go ahead and get to some of the quick hits involving the world of sports that maybe you missed out on or maybe you forgot about. One of the biggest headlines from Monday had to be the announcement that Garrett Nussmeier was going to be named number 18. That number every year is given to the leader of the LSU football program. It's been a while since it's been given to a quarterback, but it's an iconic number, a lot like the number 7 given to the beast, the guy that is truly him, and that is going to be staying with one Harold Perkins, an absolutely amazing player that looks to be kind of getting ready to get his shine on, and probably, if he plays his cards right, is going to be a top 5 pick in the 2026 NFL draft alongside, obviously, Garrett Nussmeier, who could very well, if he has a great season, probably could be a Heisman contender, and he follows in the footsteps of Joe Burrow and Jaden Daniels. He could be the next LSU Heisman winner, which would probably elevate him to top dog in a lot of mock drafts, which that's another thing that I'm going to get to is I saw this over the weekend that there were some mock drafts already being put out for 2026. We're not even into week one. And the Saints in this mock draft were projected to be the number 1 overall pick, which I understand. I'll get some more thoughts on that probably in the next week. But you have to say, he's probably not that guy. Who the mock draft selecting that is Lenore Sellers, the quarterback out of South Carolina. On paper, I get it, but at the same time, I feel like Nussmeier, if he's there, they're going to take him. Bottom line, especially if the Saints are the number 1 pick as projected for reasons. But it is going to be intriguing to see how Garrett Nussmeier leads this team this Saturday over in South Carolina to take on Clemson. We'll get to that and so much more a little bit later on in the podcast. But I think the biggest story of the day involves the New Orleans Saints because it was a busy day as it was cut day in the NFL. And we saw a lot of players getting waived and released on Monday, most notably Cam Akers getting released. And a lot of these guys that got waived on Monday afternoon, I think a lot of these are no surprise, like James Burnip, Roger Daniels Jr., Moochie Dixon, probably the one surprise out of there. Seth Green, the tight end, not the guy from Robot Chicken or the voice of Chris from Family Guy. No, the tight end, Seth Green. You also had Tyreen Powell getting waived. And some other surprises as well. Clyde Edwards-Helaire was released today. So you've got your running back room is Alvin Kamara, Kendre Miller, Velus Jones Jr., and Devin Neal. I said on the pod on Monday that Devin Neal is a guy that I think you have to kind of watch out for to be a big component of this running back room. And he made the 53-man roster. Jake Haener was waived. I was definitely surprised by that news, because I felt like they were going to keep him as a third quarterback, a just in case. But I think they're kind of playing the odds here and hoping that there's a good veteran quarterback they can snatch up in that downtime and probably cut somebody else from that lineup. Some other notable players, Dante Pettis, Kevin Austin Jr. got released in the wide receiver room. You have Landon Young and Barry Wesley, they were placed on injured reserve, so they'll be sticking around the 53-man roster. And you also had the Saints get a trade acquisition with Dallas Cowboys to get offensive lineman Asim Richards, which is going to be a really good, offensive line depth, which is what the Saints need, because you've got Landon Young, Will Clapp, among others. They're all out for the year. A lot of these guys are going to be out for an extended period of time. Can Trevor Penning get healthy and get ready? You're going to be relying a lot, probably for the first part of the season, on the rookie out of Texas, Kevin Banks Jr. Another player that got released, Isaiah Foskey, which was no surprise to a lot of people, but it continues to speak to something I feel like we don't talk about enough. We give all the credit in the world to Mickey Loomis and what he can do with the salary cap and the magic he pulls with that. But the biggest thing that's affecting this team is the NFL draft and what he's done the last 5 years. Or better yet, let's just go the last 10 years, dating back to 2014, one of the worst NFL draft classes of all time. Now, yes, the fruit has been bore on a lot of the players that they got in previous classes, but when you have a former second-round pick in 2022, Isaiah Foskey, get released and you don't have anything really to say good about him, as you kind of see Cam Jordan getting towards the tail end of his career. Chase Young, obviously, he's dealt with his injuries in the past. You got a lot of older guys on the defensive end, and you've continued to kind of whiff on a lot of these. Peyton Turner's another one. Still to this day, I will never understand why they drafted him in 2021. With all those guys that you've released today, Isaiah Foskey definitely stands out the most to me. No surprise there. And it's mainly because he just really wasn't a great producer. But again, outside of 2017, what has Mickey Loomis done in the NFL draft that's significant? And I saw Fletcher Mackel say this on Twitter earlier today, and I have to kind of disagree with his opinion on this, is saying that, only one Pro Bowl player drafted, and that was Eric McCoy since 2018. And he said that if 24-25 classes don't produce foundation pillars, Saints are doomed, and Gail Benson and Dennis Lauscha are going to have to make some front office changes. I think they should. They absolutely should do some front office changes, but at the same time, I don't see that happening. Somehow, some way, Mickey Loomis will not be touched. He is Teflon Don in this situation for reasons I do not understand. He has absolutely fumbled the bag when it comes to the draft. He's probably the biggest reason why the franchise is in the shape it's in, because they've kind of kept kicking the can down the road. And now I think we're getting to the point where there's no more can left to kick, and they're trying to get out of that problem. But you also don't have the ability to draft very well. You trade 4th-round picks for guys that probably aren't worth all of that money, all that potential you're giving up. But that's just how it goes for one Mickey Loomis. He hired Dennis Allen. He tried to keep the culture around. Didn't work out for obvious reasons. And I'm hopeful, things do look better for this team in 24-25. In 2025, 2026 and beyond. But I just can't see that based off of what he's done, which has been, trading really strong top 100 picks for relative jabronis. It's not a great look. And it's continuing to kind of bear some fruit that you're just like, okay, what do we have once X, Y, and Z are gone? You're starting to see a lot of who's on this roster, and that's not a great look for your franchise if you can't get your act together within the next 2 to 3 years. And that's what you need to have happen. Kellen Moore needs to kind of step in and say, hey, I want to get X, Y, and Z. And now the Saints also pulled off the thing that they've been waiting to do. It's like, why did it take so long? Over on Airline Drive, we finally got white smoke. There is a new starting quarterback in town, and that is one Spencer Rattler. No surprise in my mind. After 3 preseason games, weeks of training camp, we wound up seeing everything come up for Spencer Rattler, former Oklahoma, South Carolina quarterback. He's looking to kind of redeem himself, because again, last year he was thrown into the fire alongside Jake Hayner, and Rattler looked okay. But again, whenever you have your offensive line decimated, starting quarterback gets injured, he's done for the year, he eventually retires, all this stuff happens. At the end of the day, you got to go with a guy that has been in the system for at least a minute. Is it the right decision to make? Probably not. But he is going to be a guy that's going to be there for about a minute. And that leash is going to be very short. I would not be surprised if by week 6 or week 7, they let the rookie take over. They're going to give him plenty of time to kind of get used to this new system before they really, truly pull the trigger. I would be absolutely shocked if we do not see Tausche be able to be the starting quarterback by the middle of the season. I think that Spencer Rattler, I said on Monday, you can vouch it here, it's on tape, is that Spencer Rattler will not be the starting quarterback by the time we get to week 18. If he is, great. It means one of two things. Either he's locked in and he is getting very good, or you're truly just embracing the tank to go get a Garrett Nussmeier, or if he even is available in 2026, an Arch Manning, you might as well just bite the bullet. And I think Spencer Rattler, I'm hoping he does well, but I'm not necessarily certain they're going to give him the run that he absolutely should get. He's probably more towards the bottom half of the NFL quarterback tier list. But trust me, I mean, the one that he's not at the bottom of the bottom, but he's pretty doggone close. He's not a Kenny Pickett, but the bar and the gap between Kenny Pickett and, let's say, a Spencer Rattler, it's not that far off. And now let's get to the meat and potatoes of today's show, and that is the Louisiana Coaches Hot Seat Rankings. And it feels apropos to start off with one man and one man only, and that is Brian Kelly. Everybody's kind of like debating this in like a lot of different circles. I think more locally, it's safe to say that he has the hottest seat in all of college football. A lot of people believe it's college football playoff or bust. And I'm not necessarily going to go that route. Mainly because I think the seat will get scalding if they lose to Clemson in the Battle of the Death Valley, but he has a chance to redeem himself. I think if you can get to the conference championship game, the SEC title game in Atlanta, I think all the bad juju that program has goes away. Is it necessarily the biggest answer in the world? No. I think that if he can get it together after the Clemson game, if they lose on Saturday over in South Carolina, it's going to be a bad look. But at the end of the day, he continues to recruit at a high level. I think that alone should get you some goodwill. And there's a lot of good with this team that he has built. Harold Perkins, you've got a really good receiving core. Running backs, somewhat, not all of them can be Leonard Fournette in 2015. Kind of crazy that was 10 years ago. Wow. Anyways, so you've got all these great top tier players. Garrett Nussmeier is starting to really evolve his game. I did not expect to be talking about the Nuss Bus as a potential Heisman contender, but here we are in 2025, and he has a chance to do just that. So I think he's got the hottest seat in all of college football, but it's not as CFP or bust. If he gets to the SEC title game, I think there's going to be an extended stay of execution, but then you've got to kind of look into 2026. And if you continue to lose in that season opener, that seat is going to get a whole hell of a lot hotter. Not necessarily Les Miles after losing to Wisconsin, but pretty close. And we kind of go back to the Vermilion and White, talked about them a lot on Monday's pod, is that Coach Des, he has a very cool seat right now. And I think by the end of the year, it could get a little warm, but all depends how the season goes. I think, I said yes on the pod Monday, 9-3 is their record. I think that's my prediction, and I'm going to stick with it. The floor, though, is probably 7-5 or 6-6. He'll probably be fine if it's 7-5, 8-4, 6-6. I think the seat warms up a little bit more And some people might think maybe he is a one-hit wonder. I definitely feel like he's going to be fine for at least the next 2 to 3 years. Could that change? I don't know. But if he manages to pull off some really good wins to start off the season against Rice, and if he somehow, some way pulls off a massive upset against Mizzou, then we're talking about, is he going to stay? Because this could be a situation like Billy Napier, where he has a really good run. He has some opportunities to move up in the world, and then you kind of just repeat the process. Because I guarantee you, if there's some jobs available and they want somebody who's a young mind, who's sharp as a tack, I think Dez is that guy. But I don't think he's going to go anywhere, at least in the near term. Let's go to Nicholls State. They had a really nice win on Saturday. Tommy Rybecki, the dude is cool like the other side of the pillow right now. He taking over a legendary head coach, 1-0 after a nice season opener against Incarnate Word, the defending Southland Conference champions. He's not going anywhere. I think it's very, very simple. And we'll make our way up to North Louisiana for these next two hot seat predictions. Bryant Vincent, he's probably the weirdest position of college football because he's not only the head coach, he's also the interim athletic director. This isn't high school football. This is the NCAA. And this is at a time where I think the program at UL Monroe is in complete flux, and I think could very well be dropping down to the FCS level in the next couple of years. This is something I've been thinking about since COVID, because when they lost all that money because of the body bag games they had scheduled, especially against SEC opponents, when they opted to go towards, I believe it was an 8-game schedule that year. At the end of the day, you have to make money, and losing that money probably hurt a lot. And they are definitely thinking about possibly dropping down to the FCS level to kind of save themselves. That's just kind of how I see it. And I've seen it for the last 5 years. Could it happen by the time we get to 2027? I think more likely than not. I think that's also a big reason why ULM and UL and all these other Summit Conference teams said, hey, let's get La Tech aboard. It doesn't look great having 3 teams from the boot in your conference, but I think they definitely kind of see the writing on the wall that maybe UL Monroe may be exiting stage left, but not like Texas State going for greener pastures, but dropping down a level and relegating themselves to the FCS, because things definitely seem a little lean, not just in the athletic program, but in terms of the entire university program, about 3 hours north of right here in Lafayette, Louisiana. And we'll stick with North Louisiana with La Tech. And I think Sonny Cumbie's on the hottest seat that's not Brian Kelly's. 11-26 as the head coach of Louisiana Tech in 4 seasons is horrible. Pa ball. And he's got a very short leash this season. We're going to waste 0 time and say he's probably second hottest seat in the state of Louisiana next to Brian Kelly. Meanwhile, John Summerall, he's good for at least 2 to 3 years. He could have another great season, take over another program, not out the realm of possibility. I think a 9-3 record is definitely in the realm of possibility for this team going into season 3. And I believe he'll remain the guy in charge for the foreseeable future. And then you have Matt Viator. He's back in the Chuck, and I firmly believe he'll be safe through this season at McNeese. You don't always see guys getting fired in the first year of a contract. I highly doubt that's going to happen. That said, crazier things have happened, but I believe there's going to be some patience and some grace for those Cowboys. That's what you got to do sometimes. You got to give yourself some grace. I'll wrap up with Southern and Grambling. I think Terrence Graves, he's going to be sticking around long term. 9-5 as a head honcho for the Jags in the last couple seasons is very impressive. I don't see it changing that much. They did lose last weekend in the MEAC SWAC Challenge, but I definitely feel like they're going to get better as the season progresses. And we'll wrap up with Mickey Joseph. I think his job is pretty safe as long as he doesn't just kind of regress towards the mean. 5-7 last year in your first year with the program, not the best look, but hopefully he can improve upon what was done last year. And we'll wrap things up in a nice little bow here, talking about some of the predictions I have for some of the teams across the state of Louisiana on Monday's pod, broke down the Cajuns and Green Waves predictions. I'm going to go ahead and go with La Tech, ULM, and we'll lump in our FCS, some of our FCS schools in this as well. I'll go La Tech, ULM, and McNeese real quick. And with La Tech, we'll start off with them up and down 2025 campaign. You start off right out the gates against an FCS opponent in Southeastern, and then more likely than not a body bag game against LSU. And then you have a coin flip against New Mexico State. Then you follow that up with Southern Miss, and you'll be taking on their new head coach and also half of Marshall's roster from last year. And that's before the meat of conference play in terms of a win-loss record. I'm throwing in 5-7 for the Bulldogs. And again, this is all kind of based on eye test, not necessarily hours and hours of notes looking at the program. Just purely off of eye test, because I think that's the biggest bar I have. Now, UL Monroe on that eye test is in a very similar position. They open up with a cupcake against St. Francis, PA. Then they play Alabama. And I don't think 2007 is repeating itself this time around. No, it's the new coach's second year as head coach replacing Nick Saban, but I definitely don't think we're going to see a repeat of 07. Then they have UTEP, Arkansas State, followed by Northwestern. They could easily be 1-4 by early October, like October 1st. They could be 1-4. That's not a great look. Then the rest of their schedule and conference games, I think they have a chance to probably take two of them. Talk about Arkansas State. I think that's probably one of the games that you could win. Kind of a coin flip. Texas State is the other one that I'm thinking about off top. So with all that in mind, I think that I got to give the Warhawks 3-9 or 4-8. That's kind of where I think their ceiling and floor are. Just very close to each other. All depends on how one of those conference games goes. And then we'll wrap up with McNeese football. Again, Matt Viator returning. You got Louisiana Christian University to start off the season. I think you win that one very easily. Then you've got the game against the Raging Cajuns, renewing that old rivalry. I think Cajuns win that one. Then they've got Weber State, Utah State. Utah State's probably going to be lost, so they'll probably be 2-2 just before getting into the month of October. They get Stephen F. Austin, Southeastern, Houston Christian, Nichols. I think Nichols is a loss. So at the end of all this, you probably, I would say you're probably going to be staring at 6-6, 7-5, which I think is would be outstanding for a program that has struggled a lot in recent years, especially in the aftermath of COVID. But I think they can kind of get back on the right track. And that'll about do it for today's edition of the Louisiana Lunch Hour podcast. Appreciate you. Go ahead and subscribe today over on Spotify. We're working on getting on iTunes before too long. More importantly, check us out on YouTube and all social media platforms. If you're listening on Spotify, go ahead and look at the description and follow us on those links. It is just that simple. And I'll catch you on a Friday as we kind of wrap up the work week and, more importantly, getting you ready for a long weekend of college football.